Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 55 of the NTS Podcast. You may be wondering from the title that clearly says featuring Guldborg, you might be wondering where he is. It's just us for the first half an hour, unfortunately. So we're going to go through some of the UK-focused stuff. Maybe Guldborg wouldn't have watched, or wouldn't make too much sense to speak about. So going to recap in the UKEL final that obviously happened last weekend. Maybe looking a bit about the UKLC final and some things that have gone on there. Roughly about half an hour or so, we'll get Guldborg on and then go into some of the more NLC heavy stuff. Something maybe to touch on, just this not maybe breaking news, but literally only happened in the last hour or two, was the announcement from M&M about their UKLC spot. So obviously we'll come on to more about M&M later when we talk about the relegations and things. Obviously then getting relegated to the UKLC started this whole drama about the spots, because they could obviously in the rules they could sell their UKLC spot, which meant that only one team from the UKEL could get promoted, which kind of made it, to the UKEL teams at least, is pretty unfair that they've been fighting for two spots the whole split, and then because of M&M 2 divisions above them, because of how they perform, will mean that obviously only one team would go up. So what M&M they haven't clearly outlined it, which is maybe a bit of confusion in their post, but basically they're kind of giving the idea that they're just going to kind of give up their UKLC spot that they could have sold, and will let it go to just the second UKEL promotion side. So basically it's going to...
Essentially, the way it looks like is that the UKEL, we're potentially thinking that whoever is basically makes it through and would have been promoted if it was any other team which had gone through, the chances are that they will purchase the roster, the spot. But that may not be true. It could just go to another UK org as well, who maybe M&M feel deserve it. Maybe, we don't know, but it looks good, and I think it's solved a little bit of the problem of actually consistency throughout the league. And I think it's actually important because it is quite a recent topic, and we'll dive into the UKL and a little bit into the UKLC a little bit now. But I think that for me personally, there needs to be consistency. I think the issue is there's been one rule for one league and one rule for another.
Yeah.
And part of that is because largely the UKL has been separately than what is with DreamHack, essentially.
Yeah.
And I feel like just communication was not there. The rules, obviously, probably for DreamHack have been there for a while anyway, as opposed to with the UKL. So it's hopefully there's definitely discussions, and hopefully we kind of just see one set rule, whether it be a UKEL academy side has to sell their spot, or whether it be it is just null and void, which I actually, if I'm being honest, probably prefer that option, really. But
I think so as well. But we've actually got Synergy in the chat now saying, "Oh, my rules are about to get flamed." But yeah, I wouldn't say it's like you say, it's not really either rule is necessarily bad. I think it is probably the case that it's just both have been sort of laid out while things were separated, and now it's joined up. It's maybe a bit of oversight more than anything, which you imagine will probably get sorted out over the off season anyway. But yeah, I just thought we'd touch on that quickly because that was obviously very recent. But then, kind of getting into the actual sort of meat of the episode, then we'll start off with the UKEL final, which was last Sunday, and actually literally last Sunday or last weekend, it was felt like doing a full-time job, just watching all League of Legends. Obviously, there's playoffs going off everywhere, but then the UKEL and NLC finals on the same day, back to back. It was mental. But yeah, we started off with the UKEL finals between Demise Academy and Lucent, who were obviously formerly Hive, who I think were third seed going into it, into the final, and Demise were apart from the last couple of weeks, I think where they'd maybe dropped a few losses here and there, which could always be just because they knew they'd got first seed anyway.
No, Lucent I believe were first. I think they finished first in the end. Oh no, sorry, I was wrong. Apologies, I've looked at the wrong table of what happened with first.
Never mind. Yeah, so kind of coming into it, then it seemed like it was pretty heavily in Demise's favour, at least on paper. And the first two games looked like that was correct. Demise obviously went 2-0 up, Kurosh had a couple of good, really good games. He was obviously the MVP of the whole split, so it's kind of to be expected. And I thought especially the second game, Little Pants on Alistar was just like, it was just such a nuisance for Lucent. He was like all over the map, popping up, or it felt like he was like mid lane more than he was bot, which obviously makes sense with Kurosh being, you know, one of their best players. And then Kurosh's Ahri was kind of popping off as a result of that. So yeah, from the first two games, it was like pretty much looking like it was Demise's over and done with, more or less. Do you reckon they maybe at this point things could have got sort of in their heads a bit? Obviously,
I think
kind of goes next game.
So I think it's really weird because obviously, with the way that the rules work, obviously Demise Academy, they're playing for pride. Essentially, they're playing to kind of show what they are worth. You know, because there was it's one of those weird situations where kind of the UKLC relegation kind of two teams had already been decided with Vipero and with Lucent, because there's Lucent, yeah. So they had already been decided. So kind of like it was a weird final because like there was two winners essentially. You know, like you had Demise who could have like won, you know, and just proved themselves. But the fact that Demise Academy had made it there also kind of speaks volumes as well. And then you've got Lucent who had already kind of got what they needed by going into UKLC, and this is kind of like the cherry on top of it. So I was
Oh, I think I lost you for a second, Tom. No, we'll give him a sec. Technical difficulties. Hold on, guys. I'm going to see what's going on with Tom. Bear with us a quick second.
So where was I up to? I think I spoke for about 5 minutes. And I was like, "Oh, Lee's looking very still,
really concentrating on what you were talking about."
Really concentrating, yeah.
You were talking about the fact of Demise Academy basically not being able to actually promote from the win. So I suppose that maybe, yeah, that was kind of an extra incentive, I suppose, for Lucent.
And I think the fact that it was a reverse sweep just makes it like, so it's weird because like 3-2 is a close series, like very close, just naturally. But I've always thought that when it's like a 2-0 to a 3-2, it kind of hurts just that little bit more because it's kind of like that, you know, that grasp. But I think genuinely that all of these players involved, like, you put on a great 5-game series, in my opinion, anyway. And so, and I think that actually, if I'm being like biased, actually having a side which can go into UKLC relegations like top this kind of league, I think actually is very beneficial. But I can imagine we're seeing, you know, hopefully some of these Demise Academy players, you know, or potentially in Demise again, you never know.
Yeah.
Or, you know, possibly going further up. And I think there's a few of them. They've really shown it. But I also think that Lucent, who, you know, obviously credit to Hive as well. Obviously, Hive, the original team to go into there and stuff like that. It's the exact same team, but obviously, you know, that fresher paint seemed to work. And, you know, they basically, you know, Lucent took the name, took the team and got first with it. So you can't say that they've done anything wrong as well.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, like, especially for the Lucent players as well, obviously that, what we're talking about there with Hive is that Hive basically dropped out of the league like during playoffs. Which meant that the roster then had to be picked up by a new org in time to keep playing. And I think credit to the players for, because that could probably easily get in your head, even once they've got an org. It's just such, I imagine, such like a mess trying to sort that out kind of behind the scenes, but then to kind of crack on and then go 2-0 down and turn it around. And especially like just watching some of those team fights, Vayne God, when they were letting him have Vayne, which is like, I don't know, I'm no coach, but then it seems like a bit of an obvious.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it seems like an obvious one, especially because I think he had it a couple of times as well. And it was just in team fights. It was like you could tell he's just like so comfortable with just navigating around the fight without getting into trouble and just ridiculous. Just like solo carried some of those fights.
No, and I think like I said, like it was just an entertaining kind of series. It's what you want to see as well. Like both teams go for it, and we've seen it, and obviously like situations are a bit different, but we've seen it before where players have performed well in the UKEL and have risen the ranks. Dragdar probably being the main one. You kind of talk of. So even though it's obviously like it is like the third division, you are still looking, and I bet you any money that there'd be teams, whether it be for their academy rosters or potential academy rosters which they're building, but NLC sides, UKLC sides who will be looking at these players, because this is the point. It's to drive this talent, it's to develop this talent, and I think that's kind of shown by. I actually think that the quality which has appeared in this as well, as along with the entertainment.
Yeah, and then obviously with the UKL, there was just the announcement today about some, I think it's like a university tournament going on as well, and just the kind of key thing that I really like about that is the fact that it's kind of everything's somewhat being brought under the same umbrella, if that makes sense. So I've seen that. I think it was Dom Sacco from Esports News UK. I think I've seen him say it a few times where it can, I suppose, sometimes for someone that's like not really involved in the scene much, could maybe be a bit daunting to see like where you start, because obviously you've got like the NLC ladder with 3 different leagues in it now, but then you've also got NEL stuff going on. You've got NSC doing stuff, even like British Esports Association doing stuff, and it could maybe be a bit overwhelming. So to see NSC and NEL both involved with it, but then have it under the UKEL as well, obviously it gets access to their viewership and gets more eyes on that kind of university ladder as well.
I think it's kind of just like bridging. I think it's just bridging that gap, isn't it? It's like it's not necessarily like they've got to all merge together, because I do actually think individually they do cater to different kind of people and cater to different sectors, and I think that really works. But what it is it's raising that awareness. It's like being like with NEL, it's like, well, if you want to try your luck, you can do this. We can associate ourselves with this, or the Belong arena challenges, with game and stuff like that. There's loads of different avenues which could go. And obviously, with the fact that this scouting, this proving ground scouting proving grounds UKL is in partnership with NEL and NSC as well, is huge. I think just like reading like briefly, I believe it's like you're getting like 4 teams as well, and they're going to be coached by UKEL like staff from representatives from a UKLC team. Sorry. Yeah. So I think that actually really works really well as well. It gives kind of more experience, especially like more experience as well for me in like regionalized experience. Like sometimes it's great, obviously, if you get like an LEC coach like teaching you and stuff like that. But sometimes it's even better when you have someone realistically where you would be starting at, saying that actually this is what we would be doing. This is how we would be, playing. It won't be you're going to a team house. It'd be kind of this is how we would and how you would realistically start practicing. And I think that's actually a really good kind of initiative. And that more awareness, I think, is great. And we've seen it. Like you look at like I said, the UKEL finals. Like that's a lot of regional names in that league. Obviously, we saw it like we've still got the likes of Prosper, but we've seen it with the likes of Soft. We've seen it with the likes of Nolte. Kind of these British players who are starting to be built, and hopefully we could see more and more of that in Dragdar as well. So
yeah, and even from the university stuff, I'm pretty sure Kerberos was like even used to play in that. Synergy, I think, used to be involved with it as well. So even if it's not necessarily playing, it's just it's a good way for people to get involved in the scene as well. And yeah, I think, like you say, bridging that gap is obviously very beneficial. After that, then let's maybe just quickly talk for a few minutes before we get Guldborg on about the UKLC final, which although it was a few weeks ago now, I don't think we really covered it that much at the time. But that one as well was kind of a similar situation. Well, even more so than with Demise. But with Resolve in this case, we're like clearly, I think, overwhelming favourites. Had not dropped a game throughout the regular season or playoffs, and then literally came and lost the first game to London.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. But then, to be fair, across the 5 games, so it was a 3-2 for Resolve in the end. London didn't look like the worst team at all. Like even the last game was really close, I think. Well, not really close, but it was like the whole series was much, much closer than you would have thought. It kind of felt like to me like the whole series was like whichever bot lane kind of popped off the most. Like there were some games where Yusa was just like completely mega fed, and then other games, I think it was a Vayne game from Denvoxy, especially that I'd noticed where it was like watching Vayne God again playing on Vayne, where he was just like ducking and diving around everywhere, no one could kill him. And it was really entertaining, I think, especially seeing those two kind of outdoing each other game after game.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it was so interesting, like kind of seeing, I hate saying because it's Resolve, but Resolve's mental resolve throughout that game, because like obviously every team takes it a little bit differently, but it drew me back to being like, this is what happened when BTXL didn't lose anything, like they got really, really good, and then as soon as they kind of had that challenge, like serious, legitimate challenge in the finals, they kind of crumbled. And obviously, it didn't work out that way. They actually really picked themselves up, and it was back and forth. It was constantly one hit, and it felt like for a lot of it, I think game 4 was a little bit different, but I think that the other games, it was very much like who had momentum. Like you try to gain that momentum, you can try and snowball it. I think that game 4, which was the Vayne one, was more of like, this is like a carry, this is like a really good performance, or a carry performance from Denvoxy. But I think that most of them, it was very much like, let's keep that momentum going. Let's take these advantages and let's, not drop them. And I do think that actually really showed, I think, both teams' mechanical skills throughout, because normally if you're playing a perfect game of League of Legends, normally what you're doing is you're taking that early game and you're not losing it from there. But the way that it obviously happens is you lose a team fight, and that's how it shifts, or objectives, and that's how it shifts. But the fact that both of these teams seem to be very good in the lead really did build me up for Telia Masters, which didn't go as well as we thought. But
not quite, but
I think before we get like Guldborg in to talk about like Telia Masters and a little bit more like relegation and stuff like that, I just want your thoughts on how the UK sides performed. Like, how do you think that both sides actually did in Telia Masters?
I think out of the two, I'd say it was only really Resolve that was really disappointing, to be fair. Like, and it may be that we were, I don't know, I think we could have had like a bit of bias, kind of expecting them to be better than we thought. I don't know, because to be fair, I didn't really watch much of those other leagues, the Swedish, Norwegian, and everything like that. But I'd just seen these players that we've seen play for a long time, and players like Soft that are clearly at the NLC level, so kind of thought it would be not necessarily a breeze, but that they'd get past the groups. When it comes to London, I think especially now that the whole thing's finished, and you look at the two teams that did get out of their group ahead of them, were the two teams that were in the final, basically, and were the two best teams in the tournament. So I think for London to only been a game away from getting through as well, I don't think you could be... Sorry?
I actually agree. I think that overall, I think that London performed better than Resolve. I actually don't think you could deny that. I think they're actually, and mainly because I think that there were games in Resolve's group where I was like, they should have probably won that. If I'm being honest, like with the quality and what we expected from them, they should have won that. And if we're being completely honest, I didn't have that same faith in London. But then that faith kind of grew, and it was so close for them, like you said, to getting it out. And I'm really glad with kind of both UK orgs. There's definitely a sign of development. I think compared to what we saw like last split in the Telia Masters, I think there's definitely like a lot more growth. And I think, to be fair, while it would have been nice to have had someone in like the Telia Masters, like the NLC relegations, I think the fact that we were showing growth, we're showing signs of development, is a good sign overall as well.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. At that point, then I think we're more or less ready to go and grab Guldborg and bring him in. So we'll have a brief intermission. Don't go away. We'll be back in a couple of minutes with Guldborg, and then we'll talk about NLC, relegations, and all of that. So yeah, see you in a second.
Hi.
Oh,
Oh, I'm watching it. So.
okay, we're back, and I think.
Hey.
Okay, I've seen it. I'm just waiting for it to actually show up on the stream, just from paranoia. But we're back. Guldborg is here. Guldborg, how's it going?
It's going pretty good.
Very good. So yeah, obviously here to kind of focus a bit more on the NLC side for the rest of the episode. Maybe before we get into that, just to have maybe a little kind of catch up since last time you were on. So I think you came on, I think it was around December, so like after last split. And obviously on the NLC that you've been covering, we'll kind of go through that. Then obviously I think one of the other kind of big things you're involved in at the moment since then is the EUniverse as well. So I thought maybe talk about that a little bit before we crack on with the rest. Just kind of see how that started really, and yeah, was that something that had been planned for a while, or was it just kind of like a sudden thing? So is it Dino and yourself and Megalodontus kind of like the main guys?
So how it turned out was after your Masters, I was not pissed at Riot, but I was like, man, I feel like we could get a bit more content out there, because EUMasters to me always feels like that. Build up. Oh, EUMasters here, then just forget about it, then forget about it. Oh, EUMasters is here, forget about it. EUMasters, like, it feels so sudden for the casual viewer that all of a sudden EUMasters is there. Obviously, for the people that's following ERLs, they'll be knowing about it all the time because we know that's what we're fighting for. But for the casual League of Legends viewers, like, I have friends that I speak to, and then they're like, what is EUMasters? What is an ERL? And I feel like that should be common knowledge if you're following competitive League of Legends, at least in Europe, right? So I reached out to Megalodontus because I know he does a lot of ERLs, and I've did an interview in him in the past, and we speak a lot every now and then. And I was like, hey, I've been thinking about making a show. I'm not specifically sure what I want it to be about yet, but I was wondering if you wanted to get in on it. And then he was like, you know what, that's funny, because recently gotten the same message from another caster, which said caster was Dino. And he hooked me and Dino up together, where we started brainstorming, what could we do here? What could we do here? How could we make a nice show? And at first, we wanted to highlight the new personalities that was coming into the LEC, because there has been a lot of people going in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to make an interview with Zigenda, because me and Zigenda started out together. When I started casting, he started his pro career in the Danish scene as well. So we kind of grew together from there. So I wanted to make an interview, but he was like, I'm not going to make an interview unless Vitality tell me I need to. He really didn't want to. So we had been that started in November. So we had been building on that for like a month, and then the interview fell through. And then we were like, shit, what do we do now? And then we're just like, you know what? How about we get all the casters together? We get that recap going, and we'll just see how it happens. And then Dino got his friend Yannick, who's an absolutely insane producer, editing everything together. Like, it looks so professional. Mm-hmm. We had an idea how it could look, and then when we finally had the final product and our first video got like 2K views, we were just like, all right, how did this happen? Why is it so good? Like, and then it just kind of built on that. So it wasn't directly planned to be the product we wanted in the beginning, but we're very happy with how it turned out, and we've got loads of new stuff on the way. Hopefully for next season it'll be ready. But yeah, I can't talk too much about that yet.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And obviously you've been busy, on LEC, on being. I think EUniverse has been mentioned on every single ERL. I think ever since then. So
yeah,
how is it to kind of get that that recognition? Because I can imagine a lot of that is probably like just them wanting to cover that.
Yeah, for sure. Like at first, it's obviously I'm really thankful. It's crazy we got to be in the LEC. Like, I was shitting my pants when I was on there. Like, I was, if you like, for newer people, I probably just seem excited, but I was just so nervous. I was just like, oh my god. But yeah, obviously it was really great. But how that turned out was, first they messaged Megalodontus, but as many people may know, Megalodontus doesn't reveal his face and voice and stuff like that. He's very an anonymous character. And then they reached out to me the day before it happened. First day night, Quick just like messaged me on DM and Twitter and just, hey, do you want to be in the LEC tomorrow? Fuck yeah! And then I got on to be there. But I really wanted it to be Dino. Actually, at first, I was writing to the others in the group, hey, should I pass this on? But since we already rejected with Megalodontus in the beginning, and then they got to me the night before, if I rejected, they probably wouldn't give us the chance, because we're just saying no then. But reason for that being is Dino is the newest caster, but he's the one that's putting in the most work for that project, without a doubt. Like, he is really putting every piece together. So I would have loved that he was able to get that recognition. A lot of casters need exposure to get European Masters. If you're not doing the NLC, which is already an English broadcast, it's really hard for you to go and do the European Masters. I think Chronicler was the only one last season at EUMasters that was there from the Belgium League, and otherwise than that, it was pretty much NLC and friends, right? Then we had Penguin from LPL coming in as well, but other than that, it was just it's really hard to get into. You need the exposure, so I really hope Dino is getting a lot of exposure for Riot. I hope they're looking at our project, because I really think that guy deserves to get more. He's like only sitting at 200 followers. I'm already at 1.4, 1.5 or some stuff like that. I don't really need that, right? They already know who I am, but I want him to know who he is. So if there's a few viewers, DinoCast on Twitter, go check him out. He's really insane.
Cool.
And it's great because I always wanted to kind of watch like ERLs. Like, obviously, obviously I started with like watching the UK scene, and then obviously when you start watching the UK scene, you start looking at, I want to watch this and I watch that, and then you're like, oh, but there's a lot out there. Like, there is a lot of League of Legends out there, and so kind of having like what I do normally is that I will watch, because I've been watching like the LFL like briefly and like the Prime League and stuff like that. So what I'll do is I'll normally kind of just like breeze through those, but I'll specifically look at the ones then after that and be like, right, because these are the ones which I haven't watched. And I think that that's good, because it kind of gives you the choice of like, you can choose to watch these leagues without actively going through like 4 or 5 hour broadcasts, and exactly. To be fair, you hope that then some people would look at that and be like, actually, I do want to watch that broadcast, because these actually are interesting teams, interesting games, and so it can work both ways as well.
Yeah, and that we specifically in YouTube, even in the short YouTube, I say short, but some of them goes to 20 minutes, and that's pretty long for YouTube video for some. So we've even created timestamps, and like you can scroll through, I only want to hear about the LFL today, I only want to hear about Prime Leagues, then you can just specifically goes to to those markets. With that reason as well, that not all people is going to be like, I want to hear about every region. Some people only want to hear about LFL. Some people only want to hear about Prime League or Leader or something like that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it works really well, and I think Megalodontus as well is like the perfect person to be involved with that. He seems to literally, I feel like Megalodontus seems like he knows absolutely everyone and he knows every league, and it's just crazy. The guy like just lives ERLs.
And that was the most important thing behind the scenes as well, because he was just like, all right, how do you get in touch with these people? How do we get in touch with these people? And he just had his network ready. It was just like, yeah, okay, that person, he's ready. That person, he's ready. Like, Mega was just getting him all in on the project. Like, that was absolutely amazing. If we did not have him, that would have been taking way longer time. It would have been way harder pulling off.
Definitely. Wicked. Well, yeah, I'm glad that it's going well, and I hope it continues to grow.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So let's kind of get into some of the games then. Just before you came on, we started talking a little bit about Telia Masters, at least from the kind of UK perspective, mainly saying that Resolve was like our team expected to do really well, maybe push for the NLC, and was a bit disappointing. I suppose for the Danish contingent then was Absolved kind of the similar kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of teams where the second place teams seem to do better. When I was watching your region as well, playing the Telia Masters, I thought London had improved the most towards Telia Masters when I looked at them. I thought they looked way better. Resolve was really a disappointment from my point of view. The same with Absolved from our region. I just looked at that and I was like, oh my God, you guys, like, this is not even off day. You're straight up playing terrible league. Which is crazy because 4 of those guys were former NLC players. Like Champion had been made it to playoffs with Godsend. You had a guy who was with Riddle making it to your master play-ins, even winning Fall. You had Energy, who's been around for so long, and you had Scoot, who arguably was relegated, but still NLC jungler as well. So it's crazy to see that didn't go well. But yeah, Telia Masters always hyped to see new teams coming in and duke it out. I feel like a lot of it is just who's the most consistent. I feel like a lot of this second division is on the same level, but whoever is able to get the best read on the meta at the time, or whoever is like just on their best day, usually will get the game, because the games are so skirmish heavy. Like, it's not good macro we see. It's just like, I'm going to skill check you. I'm going to see if I can win.
And I think as well, it's so... Right, because I'm gonna say it's so close because the scoreline, obviously there's not that many games. It's weird. I'm gonna say there's not that many games, but there are a lot of games. But because you're not playing like your opponent twice, you're just playing them in like one best of 3. It's like you've got to make that series count. And I think that you're right with consistency and with kind of your development. And you kind of saw the teams which like melded the best together. I feel like were the best sides out of there. And unfortunately, like you said, I looked at Absolved and Resolve, and I think everybody really coming in, and maybe it was just biased, but especially what I was seeing is everybody was like, these 2 teams are going to be into at least playoffs, and going to be fighting, for Telia Masters anyway. And both just didn't click when it actually came to coming across, like the best of the best in the other regions as well. Whereas I look at the likes of like Galaxy Racer, who I think many kind of knew Galaxy Racer by the name itself, but like the organization, you kind of looked at like Monk, who has been, let's be honest, not great. And when we last saw him, wasn't perfect. Obviously, had the mid lane run, wasn't great. Did well as ADC, but like this kind of, you felt like this was a roster built around him and a roster which actually really worked around everybody. And that's why I felt like Galaxy Racer for me were like the best team in that entire 2 groups.
Yeah, I think a lot of it came down to who could play the best around the jungle as well, just because the meta turned out to be so jungle heavy. Yeah. So when we even saw Galaxy Racer play, yes, sometimes they would draft a priority lane for Monk, but they completely refused to play for him. It was just like, you go die that Tivitu, we don't care. We're playing around Jakey, and because Jakey was just an absolute beast, he was running it. We even saw it in the relegation games in the NLC. A lot of it was about the fast clearing Lilia or Kartus, these junglers coming out, like who had the better jungler champion and who could play the better around it.
How did Jakey not get into the NLC? I don't know if this is just the quality of players, but I was watching his play and I was like, and this is no like flame on anybody else who's there, but I was like, this guy's like a step above. Like like mechanically and like the way he thinks about the game and the way he kind of roams the map and utilizes the champions which he's got was far more than what I thought any other jungler was doing in that. And I was like, why? How did he not make it inside LC? Like, was it just someone who just went under the radar, but like it was actually insane, like seeing him play.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing you mentioned there, Guldborg, I wanted to ask in particular as well, kind of maybe going a bit more into the relegations. What you were saying about like the clearing junglers, and you mentioned Karthus. Like there's a couple of games, a couple of series where Karthus, well, different junglers as well, had like massive Karthus games. I think that I think it was Chilm that stands out as the main one, like 16 kill game or something ridiculous. But I don't think I've seen it like really anywhere else, or from what I could tell, like on the same patch. It seemed. Do you think that was something that was maybe even like a tournament meta? It's like the same teams playing against each other. If they see Chilm go 16 kills, maybe the other ones copy it, or is it something that's being missed elsewhere?
So I think it comes down to the level of play we're also dealing with at the same time. Usually, for example, let's say Team B wants to pull up a dive towards bot lane. They invest mid lane priority with jungler towards that bot lane, and they go for the dive. And they all come out with they tank the tower. Last guy comes out with about 10 HP, but they survive it, and it's a good dive for them. But that situation changes when you play against Karthus, because if you come out with 4 players and they have 20% HP, yes, it was a good dive in under normal circumstances, but now Jungler is just clearing the top side of the map. He's pressing R, and he's got 3 kills backing with Liangris Anguish and Medjay Soulstealer, and that's where it comes in. It's easier to be a jungler when you play Karthus, because if you want to replicate that success afterwards, that's no longer about what champion you play. That's about your pathing, because in that scenario, if the better jungler was there, he would have been in bot to stop that bot lane dive. Because the call would have been, all right, priority around mid, they're going to be setting up for a bot lane dive. You are pathing towards bot side, and you're there to clean up the kills when they come in for the dive or to disrupt the dive. But you don't need to play that good when you have Karthus, because Karthus doesn't care about that. He's just fast clearing, he's clearing his blue buff, and you press out. So I think it came down to that people were going for plays, skirmishes, that was skill check, that would have worked out under normal circumstances. That doesn't work out against Karthus, but that's been their style of play. So now they just struggle to change that around, because that's not something you can change in 10 minutes when you're just going from game 1 to game 2 in a best of 3. So you'd rather just be like, all right, we're banning the Karthus. And that's kind of what happened. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something teams need to elevate on towards the next split, so the lower ranked teams won't just get countered by Karthus, because that's not something we see, as you said, in the higher leagues, and that's because they know how to deal with that.
I think as well is that what we kind of saw, especially like going into like relegation and just Telia Masters in general, is that it was like there was so many occasions where one player would just get 3 or 4 kills, like really, really easy. And then that's kind of like that lane just lost. Like, and it's something that I'd never really seen that much. Like, obviously you've seen lane dominance before in like top, even in NLC, like you've seen lane dominance, but like there were times when like you would see like a Caitlyn on like 5 kills, straight off in like a 5-0 game right now. And, Karthus being another one, and sometimes with the jungler, and even in the top lane, like there were times where I looked at top lane, I was like, that's where all the kills are. And you never see that like anywhere else really. And so I wonder if it was just, I feel like, especially with relegations, I feel like a lot of pressure did come into some of those teams. Like a lot of them knew what the stakes were, and whether you were one of the teams to be, one of the sides to knock out an NLC side, you were probably nervous over that, or the NLC sides, which hadn't been performing that well, especially I looked at like M&M, but like Dusty as well. I feel like sometimes Dusty, and I think it's fair to say, I think Dusty didn't play to the level which they should have played at in this relegations. They made it through, and and fair play to them for actually making it through in the end. But I think if you actually had like a tier list of who you would put, I think everybody would have thought Dusty would have probably walked this.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, because I think especially like the last few weeks of NLC, they'd looked like they'd sort of finally kind of come around. Obviously, it was like a bit too late in the end, but then like you say, especially in the first round where M&M and Dusty both dropped to the lower bracket, which basically meant we were guaranteed to get at least one team relegated. It wasn't anything like we'd expect. Speaking of that series though, so Dusty against M&M, even after Dusty had dropped down, like I kind of would have expected Dusty to walk it. I think they've still shown so much more than M&M did throughout the split. So to see M&M actually fighting in that first match was like really nice, and was maybe like a bit of false hope as well. Obviously, kind of from our end, kind of preferring the UK team to stay in. So we saw that first match, was like, oh wow, they might actually do it. And then the game after that was the Chilm 16 kills Karthus, and it looked like maybe even just, I don't know if it took it out of the players, because then the last couple of games seemed like pretty one-sided as well. Did you guys really see that going any different?
I actually thought M&M would take that series because we had predictions from Talent coming in, and on day one when Dusty lost to Galaxy Racer, Dusty played terrible. I was looking at that and I was like, "This, you're not making it through if this is the level of play we're going to see every day." And M&M, when they played against Bifrost, I think that came down to some of the clutch moments that happened in the game. I thought Camel played a better jungle game, for example, on the Lilia. I thought he came in and did a really good job for M&M. Divine as well. I thought that roster looked better than the one they came in with. Summer, maybe that's why they made the substitution as well, or Spring rather. And I really thought M&M would take that. I was a bit sad because I was like, wow, that's our only Icelandic team going down. But that's just Dusty coming in again, because as you said yourself, Lee, it's just like they were making it to playoffs almost. There was 4 teams tied in their group, which were 3-5. Dusty was 2 games away from making it to playoffs, but they were also and they were still relegated. Like, that is crazy. That is crazy. That group was so close. So obviously it came down to the inconsistency of Dusty as well, because they had really good games and had really poor games. So I thought M&M would take it, but I guess Dusty just started to show up again on the level that we know they can play, but it's just not always we see it. It's just crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like you say, obviously the Dusty won that, and then afterwards had to win again against Bifrost, and at that point it kind of looked like they were back to what we'd seen. Like Bifrost obviously looked fairly decent as well. Unfortunately lost to Galaxy Racer, who in beating Bifrost got promoted, and deservedly so. I think they have looked much better than the other teams in the relegations, really. But yeah, then Dusty kind of came back, and against Bifrost, the second time, it did look like it was just kind of back to normal, really, for Dusty, of what we'd expected from them the whole of spring. So I'm glad that at least, because I think that's the thing with Legions, who I think have like maybe banned for the first couple of games. It looked like that maybe had a pretty big impact as well, that they didn't have the proper roster. And then the second week, even though he was back, maybe things still hadn't sort of worked themselves out. And for such a short regular season, that's was like 2/5 of the season gone from just like first couple of weeks. So maybe if it was a bit longer, they might not have even been in relegations. Who knows? So I'm kind of glad that at least just that little blip at the start hasn't totally relegated them, because they seem like a decent team, and it's always sad to see teams relegated as well.
And if I have to be honest, I do feel like, as much as I love like M&M, and I really like what M&M has done for like the UK org, like I actually look at the last like couple splits, and I do think Dusty probably do deserve it a little bit more than what M&M did, because they've had like 2, I would say, like quite poor showings in terms of roster building. And obviously, it's hard when you're building a roster, and sometimes that just doesn't work. And you kind of see like the improvement, like you said, like they realized that there was mistakes. They brought 2 players in, and actually they did look better. And it does seem like sometimes that's the M&M issue, is that they make these roster changes at the beginning, and then they actually do adapt it and end up with a better side, and it kind of raises those questions of, well, if they'd only had that side at the beginning, what would it kind of happened? But I'm really excited to see Galaxy Racer go in. Obviously, for those who don't know, like Galaxy Racer is like a huge organization in, like, I believe it's like Dubai, So the fact that they've kind of come into with an EU team, made it this far, I don't know. Is it like, I don't know kind of what the goals are for this, but if they're taking this seriously, I can imagine them doing pretty well. Like, I believe that their Twitter account is like 250,000 followers or something like that. So it's a huge organization in terms of that side as well. So this could be, a big team coming in, depending on how they kind of want to take it, really.
Yeah, definitely.
I think if I could take it back to the M&M point as well, I know I've talked with this about the other casters, because I didn't follow much of UK before I started NLC, mostly paying attention to the Nordic leagues. And now I've only seen them play NLC, but I think consistently they've been building bad rosters. I know this sounds kind of toxic when I say it like straight out like that, but I feel like, as you guys said yourself, like Jakey, why did no one in the NLC talk about him? I think there was loads of Telia Masters team where I look at the different players and I was like, through all these Telia Masters players, I could create one Telia Masters super team, just like, I want you, and still create a fairly decent competitive roster for the NLC without having to put too much more money into it, because a lot of the Telia Master players aren't getting paid that much, if they're even getting paid. Some organizations don't even have the leverage to do that. So I think that's something I hope teams towards next split will learn from, put more time into it, like go through more tryouts and anything like that. Because you say to yourself, like, it seems like they're adapting well because they know what the problem is when it's happened. But it's like maybe you should put more thought into that when you start the split. Obviously, you can't make a perfect roster every split. That's not what I'm saying. But I definitely think, for example, the Monk Mid thing was something that maybe was a bit too experimental.
And I think we do have to, like, just to play like devil's advocate a little bit. I do think you do have to take a look at that M&M is one of the lowest funded sides in the NLC from what is gauged. So obviously their resources are a little bit limited to others, but that still doesn't kind of, there are also teams who have also got low fundings and made it into playoffs, for example, and stuff like that as well. So there is like to and fro, but it's like sometimes it can work with kind of doing experimental and finding new talents, and sometimes it is especially for a side who probably expected to be like in this relegation battle, maybe to try. We've tried and tested, and unfortunately it didn't work for that time, and this one was the killer in the end, because I feel like Telia's was so much stronger, like just overall was so much stronger this split than what it was like last time. And I think that played a massive factor.
Even then Voxnet, why was he not in NLC? I was so crazy to see that as well. Like, why? Like, I don't want to say he was stuck in UKLC, but you could clearly tell there was a difference between him as an AD carry in the finals. I felt like I looked at finals between Resolve and London. I was like, man, how hard stuck is he right now? I know it's kind of toxic, but it was just he played that so well, and it just I feel like he would be a good addition to an NLC team as well.
And you even had to play like Soft, who's shown like constant development in the NLC. Did it with Tricked as well, and then kind of, I think it was a little bit more of a different situation with Soft. I think
Soft,
there was other factors which kind of came into that, but so I would be surprised. I mean, if we don't see him in the NLC or anything like that next split, I think there's something wrong. But they're definitely, I think he's another one who potentially could have gone into like an M&M or for someone like that as well.
Definitely. Let's maybe get on a more maybe positive note then, and go and talk a bit about the finals.
It's always negative for us because M&M are gone late.
True.
Guldborg's okay. It's like, it's fine.
Well, and the finals are only positive, I suppose, for Excel as well. But anyway, so yeah, with the grand final then, beat Excel, Fnatic Rising again, which, well, NLC last time wasn't, but it's a final that from the UK scene we've seen, time and time again, and it always seemingly goes one way, which was Fnatic's way until now. And it's just crazy to think. So Excel obviously came out 3-0 winners, 3.5 years since the last time they won the UK scene, and Orcs was playing for them. It's just mental, because it's weird. The whole time, that even like before Fnatic Rising existed, and there was like a year or year and a half before that where Excel still weren't, I think, hadn't really been winning the league. They always still seem like the biggest team. Like, I remember they used to have like a gaming house in the UK Premiership, and they were like clearly the only team with that kind of budget, but then was sort of still struggling to win it. So it's just crazy that it's been this long. But the final itself, I mean, I think it was probably more one-sided than I'd expected. Like, Excel were the favourites, I think, going into it. But no, I still expected Fnatic to pick up sort of at least one or two games. I think I went back to look at the predictions from the casters today. I can't remember more than one or two people even giving it a 3-0 on there. So yeah, kind of how surprising was it, or not surprising, that Excel just sort of battered them so easily?
To me, from my point of view, I thought Fnatic would come back stronger because they've already played them once, and then it's like, oh, we know what we did wrong, so now we can fix those issues. And that's always the luxury you come in with, because for Excel, it's like, oh, we have the winning recipe right here, and that's what Fnatic is looking to counter that winning recipe. But I look at Fnatic and I look at the drafts, and every time it felt like Swiffer just shut them down. Like, whenever Excel got their draft and then they tried to copy it in game 2 for Fnatic as well, but then they had the exact response they needed to it, with just backline dive against the Jinx, for example, and that just made it so hard for Fnatic to play. So it kept, every time Fnatic wanted to do something, it just felt like Excel had the upper hand and knew exactly how to deal with it. And I know we have a lot of good players onto Fnatic, but it seems like they're so uncoordinated at times. When I talk about inconsistency as well, I think the Fnatic roster, like, this is the team that almost dropped games to Kova who took them to the late, super late game with Souls and Barons and everything. And it just feels like sometimes they're in a position where they get the snowball going and they know exactly what to do. But sometimes it feels like they're shut down in the early game. It's hard for them to play their composition, and that's why it just falters for them. And it seems like it seems so surreal to say, but it seems like BTXL was their kryptonite in playoffs, which usually is the other way around.
See, I'm not gonna lie, you're completely right, Guldborg. But when it came to game 3, and it was about 20 minutes in, and Fnatic were like 5k ahead, I was like, oh, it's happening again.
I've seen this before.
I've seen this one before. XL 2-0 up, so that they win this one, and then that's it. 3-2 Fnatic going happy. All remains the same. But no, I apart from that third game where I actually think that Fnatic did well in like the mid game up until it didn't go too well for them essentially. I feel like it was all BTXL, and then, like I said, it's funny because like we should have seen the signs, because it was very similar in the last time they played them. Like it was very much like just BT were just the better side in that series, and maybe a lot of it was, well, BT have never won against Fnatic in the finals and stuff like that, because it did feel like Fnatic just never sussed them out fully. And even though they got the lead in the third game, they could never maintain that. And so I'm more worried now for Fnatic about like kind of EU Masters than what I was probably any time throughout the NLC, because there was like some flaws in there. But on the other hand, like BTXL look so good, and now they seem to have like fully clicked. And despite obviously them doing very well in the regular season, there was always issues I found with BTXL a little bit more. Like there was just like they weren't sometimes just clicking, but now in the playoffs it seems to just really kind of hit them properly. And I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing what this side does later. But overall, I think the NLC, I think it's been great this play. Like it really has.
Just on the final itself, like that game 2 draft, the one you kind of hit in that Guldborg with. I think so. Bean was playing Jinx, and then XL had like, I think it was so Nocturne mid, Nautilus, and Malphite. It was basically just everything to pile onto Jinx. And the reason it was so funny as well, because I'm pretty sure like I think it was the weekend before, XL's main team lost to like that similar kind of comp against Schalke. So obviously XL's main team, Patrick is like the best player, and Schalke played Nocturne mid against them and just totally shut him out basically. So once I saw that in the draft, it was like kind of cracked me up a bit. They kind of clearly filtered down, and it worked. Like Bean was 0-5, like literally couldn't do anything. And I think for kind of a little bit of fair play to Fnatic for the game 3 for fighting back a bit, but XL were just like clearly too strong. I'm glad at least that I'm glad that Fnatic didn't get totally stomped in the last game. I guess like the glimmer of hope does help a bit for EU Masters, like because that's what when that 3-2 reverse sweep happened to XL, they went to EU Masters, they lost their first 3 games straight after being like really good for the whole of the split before, and it kind of did look like it actually affected them. So at least it wasn't like totally one-sided every game, and Fnatic hopefully aren't too disheartened from that. But then
just you wait till Febervin gets called up as a substitute when Fnatic go to MSI.
Oh God, not again, not again.
I don't think they entwine as much now, but oh no, if we see another substitute situation again, I think I'm gonna cry.
I think I'd be more comfortable with Lindegaard coming back in than Chibs though, who had like clearly not played a game for like 6 months. But
that was our last hope.
Let's maybe talk a bit about EU Masters then. At least for now, we can see what Fnatic's play-ins look like. Still unseeded from what I can understand, which is just like I just don't understand like who's.
I think there is like a soft seeding in this one actually. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it, but I will say groups this year are looking better than last year.
Yes.
Where I think some of the groups were absolutely atrocious. I think Sector 1's group from last split.
I was going to say
free. I looked at that group and I was just like, why is this a group for itself? How what is this? It's absolutely crazy. I think the groups are more evenly split out this time around. There's only one group I would say that's more free, which is Group B. Yeah, exactly. but even the other groups, I'd say, is more competitively divided around.
Mm-hmm.
Just wish we got like, because I'm guessing that the system is the exact same, where like Group C, which is what Fnatic in, will face someone in Group D. And I was like, if only, instead of just putting us in Group B, just put us in Group A, you know, so then we can face someone in Group B. You know, it's probably even better. But I actually think that we might have one of the hardest anyway, because like the issue is that obviously you've got Vitality, and nobody wanted an LFL side. I think is like that's the big avoid. I think at this point, but also I think Sinners are a pretty like difficult side and could be a side which could surprise a few. Saying that, Fnatic Rising should top this group, but I'm actually really looking forward to kind of seeing how, you know, the likes of like Isuba, Schalke, I think, because I look at kind of the other groups and I do see like a definitive top two. But then in Group C, I do think that Sinners could pull something off as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think Fnatic is going to come out second at that. I think Vitality is going to be top, just because when I look at the LFL this year, it just like LFL and Prime is by far looking like the strongest region this year from what I've seen. I hope we can make top two, and I agree with you. Even Ghost Skiller to some point can come in and upset. I don't think you can underestimate their bot lane either. If you get them a lead, I'm afraid they might even run away with some games. So I think what worries me the most is on paper, Fnatic should be able to make top 1, top 2, but the inconsistencies we've seen from them so many times, it's something I really hope is fixed, and I hope that you have a game plan going into this group, because I think Fnatic has a roster that is really good built around. You can play around Maxi. We saw Riddle do that. That was literally everything Riddle was doing. You had Sencux and Dossi to have priority lane to play for Maxi only. Then you have Bean and Rox. Bean has been puffing when he's had resources into him. You can play for bot lane. Even Pride has been really good. And Pride used to be known as this like, oh, he's the weak side of Fnatic. He can only be weak laner. No, he's not anymore. Like, he's absolutely able to carry. So what I don't get is like, you have this triple threat team with even Fefevin in the mid lane where you can play for everyone. But it just seems like they're so uncoordinated at doing it. And I hope they fix that into UMasters.
How over is it if we have to face G2 Arctic? If Fnatic Rise have to face G2 Arctic, because that is the scariest one for me. The possibility of that happening.
I even to some extent, I know Illumina haven't been looking too good, but they did take Rogue to Game 5 as well, which won the Ultra League. So I think even Illumina, if we go up against them in Group D, for example, like I don't think Group C is the hardest to worry about. I think when you go towards that, I don't know if you call it playoffs or play-ins or whatever you want to call it, but towards the other teams you have to play, that's where I'm worried about them. So if kind of to take it back, I would love if we could play some teams from Group B instead. Although I have heard for the wins should be really good this split. I haven't watched a single game of them. That is one of the only regions I really haven't been tuning too much into, but I have heard they should be good as well, actually. So maybe even if we go for that group, it might be scary.
And I do think as well, like and then maybe this is just because it's academy roster, but like I have better faith in Fnatic than Riddle, mainly because Riddle played like 50,000 games.
That was crazy
anyway. But like I think that Fnatic should be a team which realistically, in terms of like the squad which they've put together, should be making it into groups and should be beating any side in there, and probably could potentially beat any side in there if I'm being honest. And while obviously we're saying, you know, it sucks for us to potentially face G2 Arctic and Illumina, hopefully like the same is being said, you know, with G2 Arctic and Illumina, saying I don't want to face Fnatic Rising, I want to face, you know, Vitality, but then there's Vitality in there as well. It's just it's tough, but I feel like it's actually a test which Fnatic needs, because for me, they weren't convincing in that finals. And if they do prove us wrong and get through that, then I do think actually, no, this is going to be a strong side in EU Masters anyway.
Yeah.
I just hope that they'll do well so we can get more spots for European
just
Masters.
Knock a Polish side.
I just feel like having two is absolutely insane. I don't get how we only have two. It's crazy to me, especially because it was two regions merged together. But we've rambled enough about that in the past as well. But it's just something every time we get to your Masters. It triggers me so hard.
Well, the way to do it is we beat the Polish side, because it's the Polish side which is the 4th ranked I believe, region in there now. And obviously everybody has this thing about, oh, well, there's only 2 good teams in Poland and then there's the rest. And, if we lose to Illumina, then that doesn't really put that reputation there, does it? So,
exactly. Well, plus, like, we're talking about what route Fnatic would prefer to have out, and they, like, depending on which, where they finish and which group, it could be a bit tricky. But then, to be fair, like, at the start of the split, we've been saying that XL and Fnatic are building rosters to try and win EU Masters. Like, it shouldn't really matter if it looks like a hard route out. Like, that team should be wanting to go and make a push for the whole thing, really. So I think even if it's like a pretty tricky draw, like, I don't think they've got so much of the Riddle excuse of, like, maybe saying that the plans were a bit difficult, like, in terms of the draw and everything. I don't see Fnatic really have that excuse. Like, they've clearly built a team that's meant to go far in EU Masters. I don't think it really matters that much if they're against tougher teams. Like, if they don't at least get, well, I think that for them they see it as a failure if they don't even get out of the main event groups, for example. Like, so I think anything other than that would not be great for them.
And anyway, it doesn't matter because a Brit's going to win it anyway because K-Corp are winning the EU Masters, so we're all good. So it's fine.
We got Matty sitting at the top. Oh, exactly. Is an insanely strong roster that's coming out from LFL as well. I think this last year, this spring coming in, we had a lot of new European Masters talent coming in and taking over the LEC. I think it's just a matter of time before we get another wave like that again, just because it seemed like we shouldn't be able to make stronger regions now. Like, the LEC still, they keep taking players. New players go to North America. When does the ERL talent stop coming up? And it just doesn't. Like, it just does not. Like, it seems like this is the most, from what I've seen, this is going to be one of the more competitive EU Masters, like, from all around, or the more, like, high-level play coming into it, just because of the level of play I've already seen. Like, even smaller regions coming out can really make a run for their money, which no one should underestimate. I think that so many times that we've just been looking at a team where, like, all right, you're going 0-6 for sure. And some teams will probably still go 0-6. But some team will come in there and they'll upset the group, and everyone needs to be ready for that because you cannot afford being overconfident at this year's EU Masters.
It's almost like LEC might need a few more teams coming into that league.
Yes,
because you're right. Because I look at that because I forget that, like, last split there was, like, loads of EU Masters talent which kind of came into the LEC, and I'm looking at it again. I'm like, oh, they're LEC ready. Like, there's, like, full teams which are LEC ready, and I'm like, where are they going to go? I guess it's kind of unfortunate, really, because unless it's like you go to an academy side or, but what I'm liking is with the LFL especially, and we've always had it with Spain in particular, it's like you can now develop kind of brands and organizations around some of these ERLs as well. So it doesn't have to be like, obviously the be-all and end-all is LEC, but it doesn't have to be, straight away into LEC. You can still develop. And I think that's why we're actually seeing more rising talent go through as well.
I think specifically from the LFL as well, just from the viewerships they have. Like, I'm sure some teams even from that, like, obviously not all esports teams. I think majority is not making money back, but some teams are making money back, and it wouldn't surprise me, even in LFL, that you could argue that this is a positive business coming out just because of the viewership you get and local fans in one country. Like, it's absolutely absurd to have 100k viewers in a league that's only national. Like that, that is a third of what the LEC gets when that is live, and that is just completely crazy. So I think that a lot of these teams coming from LFL, a lot of these players are having good salaries as well, where they're just like, oh, I didn't get LEC, but it's fine because here I'm still making a good amount of money. At the same time, I'm able to come better and better as a player. So it's just win-win, and that's only going to go up with the ERLs as long as we continue like this. As long as they keep these new talents going to be there. So I think for sure you're right about it being fine not being LEC for a lot of players yet.
I think that one of the mad things with it as well, it's not even like that they're all like these top players are sort of funneled into even just like one or two of those leagues. Like, when you look at it now, just even going on like the teams qualified for EU Masters at the moment, I think it's like where the import rules like slightly change, but players are like pretty spread out as well. So even like the Italian teams coming in are like looking pretty good these days, and it's crazy. It's like, like even kind of drawing it back to like the routes that Fnatic could have through and thinking about XL's groups, like there's not many like free teams at this point, especially once you get to the main event.
Question is, what is the LFL's import rule? Like, is there an import rule with the LFL?
I'm not quite sure, actually. Like, I am genuinely not quite sure.
Polish players, isn't it? and then a German player.
Well, I think isn't it?
It's fine. No hate for that. It's
I think
fine.
wasn't it changed to like you had to have 2 national players, but then one of them like could have been the sub, I think, or 3 players, but one of them can be the sub, so you can kind of get away with just having 2 in the roster, or something like that.
And the thing is, there's no official for all ERLs. Like it's specifically to each ERL what they have. For
Yeah.
example, in Italy, you can be a national resident if you are in gaming house in resident in Italy, because then you're currently living in Italy, and then you count as an Italian resident. So if you had a gaming house in Italy, you could just throw people in and not have a single Italian in the team, and that would still be okay, because according to the rules, as long as they live in Italy, they are from Italy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's because that's like what I think there was in the UK before. Because remember, like when Excel had their gaming house, I think they had like literally 0 UK players in it in the UK Premiership. But yeah, maybe something in the future worth Riot having a look at to make sure it is a bit evened out. Because I think Italy is the main one this year where they have like a fair few players have kind of gone over there with the hopes of getting a bit of an easier way through to E-Masters. And like I say, looking at like Mako, who were their first seed. Literally 1 Italian player in there.
Hey, don't diss Mako, because it's got C-Boy in there.
Yeah, I'm not dissing him, man.
NLC legend C-Boy. Went from Godsend to EU Masters now.
Yeah, I saw as well that, because I think it was because C-Boy retweeted it. Like when they won their league, they did like a video of their players like diving in the swimming pool, and it's like some like mad like villa that they're all living at, and it's crazy. And it had like Mako's logo on it, so it wasn't even just like something they'd rented for a couple of weeks. I was thinking like, Jesus, like Italian league must be doing all right. Like, where are they getting their money for that? It's crazy.
And then also got to shout out Dreedy as well. Dreedy in
that is crazy. Dreedy, oh my god, that UKM roster is absolutely insane. I can't believe they did that. Because even looking onto paper, still now looking onto the paper, I'm still in shock that was the roster that came through and took it all. Just because they have star players, but even Dreedy just like finally just I don't even know what to say. Like open like. I don't know how to describe it, but it just seems so
he looks
surreal.
Like a completely different player.
Yes,
like the development is so been really good.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So you know what, the NLC does win because we've got great players in there.
But we just don't. That's the thing. I'm looking across the country or the world of Europe, and I'm looking at a lot of Italian teams where we could make some of their teams with our input rule, but we haven't. So I'm just like, why are the Italian teams allowed to make better NLC teams than the NLC? That is, I hate that. But I also know the fact that a lot of NLC players or the residents of the northern part of Europe didn't want to play NLC for that specific reason, that academy rosters seem to be unbeatable this year, and we only had 2 slots for Masters. Had we had a third, that would probably have been a different option, because then all the other teams under the academy would probably be upping their budget to go for that third spot instead. But
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is that it's so difficult to convince kind of, I guess, teams saying like, look, join this side where you're going to get 2 Masters spots. Oh, but we've got 2 academy teams in there, and they are like, they're 2 academy teams who, especially like, from what the rumors were, and the rumors were true, were competing to compete for EU Masters. They weren't doing development. They were going to develop, but also to win, and so how do you convince a player when, you've got Italy over there saying, well, just come to us and we'll get EU Masters for you. It'll all be good. You get your exposure, because that's massive for a player to reach EU Masters, because there's a lot of exposure there, not just from like professional teams and coaches, because I like to think that coaches scout, not just the EU Masters and do scout throughout everything else. But like, even if it's just like to get your name out there and to get your recognition or to build your brand, I think EU Masters is where a lot of players want to be.
Definitely.
Even back when I was a coach, also for the EU Masters, like I remember players just being like, I mean, it puts so much pressure onto them as well, because back then I was in the Nordics, and luckily we had 2 spots for Nordics. Nordics was one of those regions that was easy to qualify for UMasters as well, because we didn't have any academy teams, so it was just like free fall every new year, every new split, right? Who came in with the better roster? And so many players would just be like, even if they felt like the team didn't work out or anything like that, it was just like, I have to make UMasters, we have to be better. And they put so much pressure onto themselves, they put so much pressure onto others, because yes, in the ideal world, coaches shouldn't only be looking at EU Masters, but reality is most coaches are looking at EU Masters and not doing the time to actually look at under, because there is not going to be the time for people. Like, obviously, it makes sense to look at EU Master, which is the best teams you're going to be getting, theoretically, and that's just then. But the problem is that sometimes a really good player will just be stuck on a bottom tier team, like Dreedy, for example, who was on Barrage, almost getting relegated. They just got that 5th spot where they didn't have to play playoffs, but didn't have to play relegations. Or maybe they did play playoffs, I think.
Yeah, they
did play playoffs. Yeah, they did play. They did get playoffs, but they got put out immediately or something like that. But even then, what I'm saying is that you have a player like Dreedy, who's just like this unshapen diamond, who you put on a roster where it just clicks with a lot of other good players, and then suddenly you have a winning formula. And I think there's not a lot of people who are going to be doing that, for example.
I think this may be like something as well with players, just to maybe be not like careful of which teams they join, but like kind of thinking more themselves about rosters that they actually work with, rather than just, I don't know, the name of the team or the name of the other players. Even like thinking back to like Munster last year, obviously they had much bigger problems than just the players, but then a lot of people have sort of looked at it since and said, well, looking at the players themselves, it didn't really look like players that actually would work together in their play styles and things. So yeah, maybe something for players to bear in mind too.
I also think for players, there's like, now I've worked with players from a managing point of view as well, and negotiating contracts and what teams have in budget. I think there's a lot of time where players should stop looking at the salary, and because if you're like, all right, we can give you 500 euros or however you can give a month, right? And there's a team who's going to be like, oh yeah, but we can give you 1,000 or 700. Like, that is not going to change your life. That is not life-changing money. Yes, on the short term, you're going to be having more money. But if it's if it's a worse roster you join just because you can get more salary, that is not going to work out for you long term. Like, just take that cut then. Go for a roster that's going to be extremely good. Have one good split, maybe 2 splits, maybe like a whole year where you're not going to be making bank. But then next year, when you've been talked about so well about how good you looked in this team and stuff like that, then the money is going to come in. Then even a good team with good money is going to come in. And that's something a lot of new players have to just, I think, swallow. That's a hard pill to swallow, but more money does not equal better roster.
Yeah.
And we've seen it. We've seen it, definitely. We've seen like rosters with lower budgets, getting to playoffs even in the NLC, and vice versa. And I can't imagine that UCAM roster being like the highest budget roster in the SLO, and it finished top, so
yeah, crazy. Well, like, speaking of some of those other EU Masters teams, then kind of looking towards the main event once plans and that are done, who do we reckon are some of like the main sort of favourites really? I'd imagine K-Corp will probably be the biggest one, but any others, do you reckon?
I think some Polish fans will still say a Go Rogue, but they are definitely not in the same caliber of strength as the last team were. I'd say myself, at least. I think Prime League, as I said, like Big and Mouse Sports coming in are looking really scary again this year. I'm not really sure about the SLO because, yeah, UKM came in, but I'm going to be curious to see how that level of play is going to go on to the other big major regions, because it's been a while since SLO has been on top, and I don't know if this is going to be the year again. I'd definitely say that maybe BTXL is a dark horse. I'm going to show full bias here and say that. I admit that, but I think that is a dark horse. But I definitely think like Mouse Sports, Big, Misfits, K-Corp, those will be the favorites to take the crown for sure.
We're in pool 3, so how can we be apparently. Is that what we're in? Are we in?
Yeah, I was just noticing that. That's ridiculous.
But that's just because the level of play we've had over the years. Like, but obviously rough schedule. But Riddle not making it into the main stage, which Riddle was a better main stage teams than a lot of the teams that qualified for main stage. Where it's just like, I hate to say it, and people, if they didn't see the group, they'd say I'm just biased here. But we had the worst group with the worst scheduling you could have to up onto EU Masters. Like, that was just crazy.
No, I think you've I think Big's like always an interesting one, because I feel like, despite how good Big have been like over the years, like I don't think anybody ever touts them as like this is the favorite in the competition. Even when they won it, like nobody was like, oh, this is the favorite. But they've just consistently done well in European Masters and EU Masters, and now obviously they've come up top. I think there's a little bit more, but I still think like if you'd asked me like as a neutral, who is top of the Premier League or someone with some knowledge, I wouldn't have said Big. I would have said Mouse because everybody talks about Mouse.
I think a lot of people will say that, and I also think that like I even have that feeling in me right now where I'm like I want to say Mouse probably will do better, but even then I might just be shut up by Big because Big is. I talk a lot about consistency. I think that matters a lot on ERL level, and I think Mouse is a team where they can skill check and sometimes fail that skill check, even though it doesn't happen that often. I think it happens 2 out of 10 times that they fail, and they have success 8 out of 10 times, but I think just Big coming in with their playstyle is just looking a bit more consistent than Mouse will be, and maybe Mouse will just hit the right flip of the coin and then come in and just take it all, but maybe they won't, and Big will just be superior once again.
We'll see. One thing I did quite like as well with Rogue obviously topping Ultraliga, given that they won it last time. Obviously, even before anything's happened, they'll probably have a few eyes on them. And Krez, the mid laner, obviously previously Senkux in the NLC. I like that he did like a tweet about it, about the fact that now that his name is changed, people will actually be like considering him again, which is quite funny. It's something we
young up and comer.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's something we kind of talked about on a previous episode about how at least in Europe it's not as bad, but like players can just get branded with a certain view that the fans have of them. Obviously, when he was in the LAC before, he didn't have the greatest of times. But he's clearly like kind of gone down to the ERLs, proved himself, was part of that Riddle roster that got to E-Masters kind of against what people expected, really. So I hope for his sake, at least, Rogue still do fairly decent. I'd like to see him maybe get that chance again, because it is a bit harsh, like especially with like the kind of ages of league players that we're talking about. Like if you think he's someone that's been around for a few years and has maybe had a bit of a chance already, but he's only 22 still. Like when he was in the LEC, he was like 19, 20, 21. So it would be like ridiculous to be just kind of written off at that point. But yeah, there's that tweet.
It's
maybe
so hard in the EU. In NA, it's so easy to get, because in NA you want a name, you want to know what you get, and that's just kind of it. And then you keep recycling the same players. But in EU, it's like as soon as one mid laner feels outdated, there's 5 new mid laners who's ready to come in and take the spot, and they're going to, and they might at the time where you're on your slump and you're on your slump and you're on your way down, they're on their way up, and you might be even at that point. But team would rather take a look at the new rookie, but that's not going to stop mid laners like Crest to come back and be like, listen, I'm still improving as a player, because you will gradually still improve. I think the age talk in League is something that needs to be thrown out the window a bit, because it like we see it in games like Counter-Strike where there's teams above 30 who still players above 30 who's still making it and still making a living out of it. I think it's going to take a while before, like at least around that 30 year before the reaction time is really going to come in and play a huge point of view. And it's not even about League is that much of a mechanical game anymore. It still is, but to some extent, like it's going to be like you see a lot mid lane meta right now, and for so long has been about control mages. You don't need the best mechanics about that. You just need to be smart about the game. And it doesn't matter if you're 24 and 21, then like you're probably still going to be able to do really well on it.
Yeah.
And I think as well, like the way that kind of just the League ecosystem in Europe is kind of working now anyway, is that sometimes it feels like if you just happen to be in an LEC team at the correct meta, which suits kind of your style to a T, I feel like that does benefit you. And then on the opposite side, like you could actually get your shot in LEC, and then maybe you're not like extremely perfect at one thing, but because there are other kind of ERL players who kind of fit that bill perfectly, they get more looked at. And so there is this kind of constant like balance and swing between these players. And I do think we're actually going to get to a point personally where we are going to kind of see players drop down, come back up, drop down, come back up, but not in a way of like, oh, they're just being reused, but in the way that actually they're developing their skills and coming back up as well.
Definitely. We've got
like that young upcomer Feathervin.
Exactly. Well, and like, yeah, because I think there's something that you do have to find a balance. So obviously, I think especially with like the Mad Lions roster going to Worlds, it kind of gave everyone that bit of sort of overexcitement about getting rookies in, and maybe even writing players off too quickly. Like obviously, Arome went to Worlds with that team, and then somehow was out of the LEC, which is just unbelievable, really. And he's gone down to the NLC and is clearly the best top laner there, and clearly is LEC level. So you hope at least, given if XL make a decent run at E-Masters, he might get back in. I saw LEC Wooloo had done a quite cryptic tweet about Excel, about like maybe hinting that they could be making changes to the main roster. So I wouldn't be too surprised if Arome is actually playing on that roster in the summer.
From what I heard as well with Arome, he actually, I think he had LEC offers, but he declined it. I think like if you followed Arome on social media, you know he's been talking about depression and getting therapy and stuff like that. And I think that Excel Academy has been the best place for him to go to. Like you see the way they work with players as well. I think I become a fan of Excel just from looking at the facilities, the sports psychologies, everything they're getting their players every day, and you can clearly tell from the players that they absolutely love the organization. Back when I went to UMasters with Cadril, back when he was going to retire, but it wasn't official yet as a player, even he was talking about like, because you would think, all right, this player is going to retire. He might shit talk about Orc if he's been under bad Orc, but even he was like, this is the best organization I ever played for, and I have nothing bad to say about them. I think that really helps develop talent as well, especially this PTXL roster that's come in. I don't think they've ever had a better academy team than they have right now, and it's just as you said, like Rome, he is still an absolutely amazing top laner. He's coming in with the best stats. Makoon, who was hyped up for the SLO when he was there last year, and then kind of got shut down, and now he's back again as like the first Blood King of the NLC, and even Hatrix is looking the best he's ever done. It just looks like BTXL is really good at creating a nice atmosphere around their players this split, or at least this time around.
Definitely. I think with that, to be honest, I've kind of covered most of the topics I had. Is there anything else you guys wanted to chat about? Anything going on?
Nothing really for me. I'm just really excited to see what happens with EUMasters. I always get this kind of like this thrill and excitement, and you know, kind of when EUMasters comes, because obviously for us especially, who kind of like, you know, watch like ERLs, like this is like a big moment. But then it's also nice because you get like when you see like the Reddit on League of Legends, like kind of like, you know, having like the matches and talking about EUMasters. I think it's nice, and it's nice to bring more people all together as well, and also to shit talk, because there's a lot of shit talk. It's great.
As a caster, you're always afraid to check those Reddit threads because you're like, "Am I getting flamed right now?"
Who
like,
is this new caster?
Yeah, exactly. Because people don't do well to new casters. They really just don't. I don't think there's ever been a new caster who came in and the crowd just absolutely loved them. There's always been that like, all right, who are you? Why should I like you? I'm gonna flame you until I know I like you. That's kind of the thought process for a lot. But if I go to a Reddit thread and I don't see a single one mention my name, I take that as positivity. I'm like, all right, great, I didn't do bad.
Well, that's what we saw with Ex-Scoundrel and Foxtrot when they were doing the like, because people, I think it's because people are used to things, like they're used to sounds. I think when they're watching like broadcasts, and they're used to kind of familiar voices, and they kind of get used to them. Like I feel like there were some people who were like, it's too British, essentially, which I don't even know. Is that even? How is that like?
I'm so used to it at this point.
Yeah.
I don't like I don't know, like, yeah, Britain is a part of Europe as well, and we're not always gonna get NA casters. I think people have been accustomed to that because we have a lot of North American casters in Europe as well, but majority of the broadcast is British as well, like Vedius, Medic, Cadril, even though a lot of people don't know it.
That's why I didn't understand the criticism, because it's like, because it's not too British, because there's loads of people from the, you know, from over there. But I'm like, but then I'm also like, as they kind of like did a couple more games, like people just kind of died down with that, because I think it's that shock of like, you know, you've got it on in the background. It's like, this is not what I'm used to listening to, you know, and I think that's what it kind of is. And, you know, it's just kind of remaining calm and keeping on, you know, keep calm and carry on.
Yeah, sure.
But even like that was only Twitch as well. I thought when I looked at the Reddit post, there was a lot of people actually who liked them. But when I looked in Twitch chat, they're getting absolutely shat on by the people. So I think like it's just Twitch chat being dumb, like Twitch chat being Twitch chat essentially. Yeah. And then you just like people on the Reddit was like, oh, I actually didn't think they were that bad. I thought they brought something in that was new and nice and stuff like that, which is good, because you have seen Reddit threads where Frost got absolutely demolished, or some other casters, for example. So I'd say that that's positive, and I hope we get to see them back in a post-corona setting where they get to be in the studio, and hopefully that's going to change some of the people's perspective as well.
Yeah, people forget you because it's so much, and you will probably know this, it's so much different doing it online than doing it kind of in a studio. And so the fact that they are not only casting, but they are casting in comparison to people who are already in a studio doing a cast, like that must be so much more difficult, because you've immediately got that comparison as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, when you say about like with Twitch chat and that as well, just think thank goodness it wasn't like an EU Masters kind of viewership when the whole like self-deprecating thing happened as well. At least it was an audience that knew who you were and knew that you'd probably been stitched up. I see you've got, Megalodontus, I was going to say, telling you to plug EUniverse before we wrap up as well. Slightly too late, we were talking about earlier, but on the topic of EU Masters then, is there anything especially planned for that with the EUniverse?
I mean, we got stuff coming up. We got stuff coming out soon. But yeah, we definitely plan to cover the EU Masters thoroughly. So yeah, at the EUniverse on Twitter, keep yourself updated.
Okay. I think with that then we can maybe start wrapping up for today. So thanks for coming on again, Guldborg. Lovely to have you back.
Always.
Yeah, be happy to have you again sometime soon. Before we finish up, I'll just quickly go through what's been going on with the UKEL. Obviously, we are kindly hosted by those guys. There have been some qualifier games going on for the promotion relegations. If we just have a look at the teams that are still left in that. So you've got Munster and Mythos, obviously from the relegations in the UKEL. And the Resolve Academy and X7 Esports, who are through from the open qualifiers. And then they will all kick off the last games to actually see who ends up in the UKEL from next Saturday. So the draw, I think, is happening tonight. So if you're watching this tomorrow, you'll probably know who's already going to actually be playing in that. But you can see on the screen at least when the fixtures are going to be. So next Saturday, you'll have Mythos starting at midday. Again, not too sure who they'll be against yet until the draws happen. And then later on against Munster. And then you see the losers sort of drop down to kind of like a lower bracket game there. And then Sunday...
I want to see, by the way, Munster Rugby versus Resolve Academy. That's the one for me.
Yeah?
That's the winner.
Well, we'll wait and see. And then, games kicking off on Sunday as well. Same time, so 12 o'clock and then 2:30. And so I think we're all done with that then. So again, thanks for coming on, Guldborg. Hope you've enjoyed it. And like I say, definitely have you again. For those that are watching on Twitch, there are a few knocking about live still. Please do feel free to follow the UKEL on there. Obviously, you'll see those games that I was just mentioning, but also we're here usually every Sunday, usually around about 4 p.m. with our weekly podcast. Otherwise, if you're watching later on YouTube or listening on Spotify, you can follow there too. And of course, you can follow us all personally. Our Twitters are on the screen, as well as the EUniverse. Do feel free to follow. They are doing great work over there.
Don't forget to plug EUniverse.
Exactly, otherwise Megalodontus will not be happy. So go and follow those guys too. And I think that's pretty much it. So thanks for watching. See you later.